Hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle and this is Afterburner. I just returned from a speaking engagement in Toronto, Ontario, Canada yesterday. Toronto is a jewel and the people there really are lovely. I went to talk about threats to civilization, and you don't get any more civilized than Toronto. I told that Canadian audience from the heart how we've always been allies, how the border between our two countries is not only the best border in the world, it's the best border in the history of the world. And I told them how much we Americans have appreciated how Canada has always punched above its weight on the battlefield as our allies and our friends. And finally, I told them how the relationship between our two peoples kind of reflects the geography of our two countries. They give us a people to look up to, and we provide the infinitely greater service of giving them someone to look down upon. So I don't want anything I'm about to say to do anything to further damage a relationship that's in deep need of repair. But I do have to comment on something that drove me absolutely nuts from the moment I first boarded that Air Canada jet at LAX until the moment I got off of that Air Canada jet at LAX. And that is the Canadian bilingualism that is law in Canada and, of course, is simply the visible expression of legally mandated multiculturalism. Multiculturalism, of course, is the mantra of the leftist elites that dominate the thought of Canadian politics and more, the thought of our moral and intellectual superiors right here in the USA. I'll get to the deeper point in a moment, because the immediate effect on one who's not used to this mandated bilingualism is the maddening, genuinely insanity-producing effect of having to read and write and say and hear everything twice. Every in-flight announcement, every airport sign, every road sign, menu, check-in instruction, every official announcement, Starbucks menu, every coat check stub, all of it, twice. For a person who loves language and precision in communication, it's enough to drive you mad. Now, in my naivete, I thought it was just rough on me because I didn't speak French, and it was only on the flight home that I realized that if I did in fact speak French as well as English, as virtually everyone in Canada does, by the way, it would be much, much worse. Because then everything you read and hear would in fact be repeated. Because then everything you read and hear would in fact be repeated. Every street sign, every announcement, as soon as you heard or read it, you had to hear and read it again. Every street sign, every announcement, as soon as you heard or read it, you had to hear and read it again. Now, at first, I thought I would have to do the entire Afterburner like this to get the point across. Now, at first, I thought I would have to do the entire Afterburner like this to get the point across, because honestly, you really need to have it just keep coming at you in order to get the full effect. Because honestly, you really need to have it just keep coming at you in order to get the full effect. But don't worry, I'm not that cruel. This will be the last sentence. But don't worry, I'm not that cruel. This will be the last sentence. What does interest me, though, is twofold. First, and by far the least important, you have to wonder what this top-down mandate, which, as I understand it, generally speaking, was a compromise designed to let the French in Quebec inflict slightly less torture on the rest of Canada than a full-on civil war, what effect that has on the cost of doing business. I mean, seriously, think about it. All of your advertising, printing, writing, proofreading, production, and marketing costs, double it. But the bigger issue, of course, in all of this seeing double is, in fact, the singular issue that a society of the West faces today, namely, what is Canada? I hear far more Spanish being spoken in the streets of LA than I did French on the streets of Toronto, and sure enough, bilingual bus signs and OSHA posters and all the rest are everywhere here in the American Southwest. And by the way, let me be crystal clear here. I have no problem at all with private business, and it goes without saying, private citizens, speaking or advertising in whatever languages they wish or whatever they think will help their business. But when you have to press one for English in an English-speaking country, you find yourself pretty close on the heels of the Canadian model. And the question for both of these old allies is, who are we? If being bilingual means sophistication and inclusiveness, then why stop with English and French or English and Spanish? Why not make safety announcements in 5 languages or 30 or in all 6,500 languages spoken in the world today? Imagine how you'll be able to brag to your professional colleagues at cocktail parties in New York or Toronto when you can tell them that your pre-flight safety announcement took longer than the flight from Vancouver to Tokyo. Language is culture. To have 2 languages, to have 2 cultures. In my view, it's the death of the entire idea of the West. Namely, people leave one culture, their home culture, their heritage, their comfort zone, to get away from one thing and come to something better. Now, every single raft that ever sailed the Straits of Florida was bringing people from Spanish-speaking socialism and universal health care to English-speaking capitalism and private health care. Every single one. There's not one case of an English-speaking dentist in Fort Lauderdale strapping some inner tubes to a lawn chair and then hoping that grandma and the baby boy and the wife and sis and little Jimmy can survive for a week in shark-infested waters to get to the glories of Spanish-speaking socialism. Not one. And as we face our embassies in flames and our ambassadors killed over what is ostensibly the exercise of one of the single, presumably universally loved Western freedoms, the main one, the right to think and say what you damn well please, well, we have to ask ourselves, if we're so ashamed or confused over who we are that we don't even know what language to speak anymore, how in the hell are we going to make ourselves understood when the clarion call for liberty and freedom need to be sounded the loudest? When the clarion call for liberty and freedom need to be sounded the loudest.